Welcome to Legal Soundings, the podcast from Harbor, where leaders from across the legal ecosystem chart the course for the business of law. Whether you're navigating change inside a law firm, leading legal operations in-house, or building the next generation of legal technology, Legal Soundings is where insight meets action.
This is Chris Ryan of Harbor, and this is the inaugural edition of a new podcast from Harbor called Legal Soundings. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first episode of Legal Soundings, Talent and Innovation in the Age of AI, a light topic indeed. Our panelists include Matt Peters, National Leader of Transformation and Partner at McCarthy Tuttrell. If you don't know Matt, he is one of the most innovative thinkers working with McCarthy and their clients to reimagine and reinvent the legal profession. We are also joined by Lauren Chung, Practice Lead of Harbor's Strategy and Transformation Practice. You may know Lauren as the co-founder of our Law Department Survey, now in its 22nd year. She is also a trusted advisor to the General Counsel, Head of Legal Operations, and the law firm C-suite. Let's begin. All right, Matt, you are going to take us back to when you were 5 years old and you knew you were going to get into law firm innovation when you grow up. You were early in this space. And we would love to know how and why did you get into innovation?
So, I could start like in high school if you want, where I told my high school law teacher that was the only thing I can guarantee, Mr. Perry, is I'll never be a lawyer. And so obviously that played out. But so how did I end up? I think being fortunate to be at a law firm that has actually kind of weirdly, a law firm that's been around longer than Canada has, which has been leaning into innovation for a long time, leaning into just trying different things. So we were the first to kind of actually become a national law firm, first to kind of actually have a different kind of governance structure. So that kind of helped to be in a culture where it sort of was sort of supported. Yeah, I stepped into this role actually about, I think almost now 15 years ago. And it was sort of set up, it wasn't called innovation at the time, but it was sort of set up to kind of look at sort of how we deliver our services, how we price them, and how we sort of pitch them. And that was sort of a new thing, certainly at the time. And it just sort of evolved from there.
Love that. Early indeed. And Lauren, kind of a slightly different, angle to that. So I know that you are a mother of four. You also are a business and practice leader in this space. And how do you think about innovations for the next generation?
Yeah, and that is such a great question. Because I think the way that we grew up, or the way that I grew up, and I watch my kids think about the future, the lens is so different. I mean, obviously, no surprise, access to information, instant access to information is just at a level that I could have never imagined growing up. I think that has really influenced the way I think about it, but I also see the way that the next generation, the younger generation, thinks about innovation. I think it's much more natural to them in many respects than it may have been for me and probably this kind of the older generation, if I would say. And so I'm excited for what I think the future is for innovation, because I think it is just going to be almost part of the DNA of that next generation, right? You're constantly being pushed and challenged to think differently because there is information readily available that you could build on and challenge and access. And so pretty exciting, I would say, again, watching my kids grow and kind of evolve in this generation of information and innovation, I think is really encouraging for what is to come.
So we're gonna riff a little bit, as they say, on some often discussed topics. So the first of which is talent. I think we'd like to start there and the role in all of this. So Matt, why don't you kind of kick us off a little bit on this? How have you been preparing teams for AI? How have you been thinking through training and development and the mentor model and cultivating skills?
Yeah, like it's actually, if there's one thing I would sort of say for the past maybe like year or two, that's really keeping me up at night, it'd be actually this topic. Legal profession is built on the apprenticeship model, and we build our talent based on sort of experience. And sort of seeing what I think many of us have been anticipating coming action now, I would sort of literally say in the past kind of 3, 4 months coming to fruition, where I've multiple messages in my inbox and conversations with our partners now where are saying, I don't like the role of the first year of my practice looks very different. And I don't sort of see the same opportunities to sort of involve them. So it's no longer something that we're talking about is coming, is actually now has come. AI is, for example, taking away the opportunities to draft and research and all those things that are normal sort of what I'll call, developmental sort of opportunities in the apprenticeship model. I think like what certainly how we're thinking about it is to turn it on its head and sort of say, okay, so can we actually leverage these tools to create sort of simulated environments for drafting, simulated environments for some of these things to be, letting the younger sort of lawyers actually practice. Like they do it with the pilots, they do it with others. We could probably do it in our profession too. So, that's part of it. And we're thinking of, do we expand pro bono to sort of create opportunities to sort of give lawyers their time on the ground? We're actually launching a division where we're actually part of the whole purpose of the division is to create some opportunities for lawyers to practice their trade. So, that when I think a lot of people are focused on, well, how do I train them up to use the tools, which obviously is important, and we're doing that as well. But we talk about talent, I think the number one thing that, quite frankly, the profession needs to be focused on is how we actually building our next generation of lawyers in a dramatically different sort of legal environment.
I mean, a while back, we heard of firms that were carving out or creating X number of hours for innovation and technology, and so it was pretty loosely termed when you would hear about that publicly. But there was, quite a few firms that in as part of associates billable targets, that they had X number of hours. Have have you ever deployed, something like that, or is that something have you kind of heard about how those have worked or not worked?
Yeah, we've heard that. I mean, our approach has been maybe a bit different. We certainly have, like, as part of our policy around AI, we have required training, all the entry classes, and there's other, required sort of training around AI, absolutely, exposure to the tools. But our experience has been quite a strong uptake on sort of utilization of it. And so for us, we haven't had to really kind of require sort of the lawyers to sort of say, okay, you need to take 5 hours and sort of just use the tools because, like our approach has been, really, it is a huge, obviously, change management exercise, but getting the tools in front of the lawyers. We're a big believer in storytelling. So, at the practice group level and at sort of different levels, sort of telling the story about sort of, this is how this lawyer's experience, how it's really sort of been a great sort of enhancement to the practice. And so for us, at least to date, using, like the storytelling sort of some training, obviously in advance, has been actually effective for us. Like our utilization of our different platform tools is actually quite high. So, it's for us, at least that's been the approach that has worked to date.
And Lauren, I know your point of view will incorporate both corporate legal departments and law firms, but what kind of skills or programs or things are you helping advise on, seeing clients use?
Yeah. I think what we're seeing is a level of upskilling that's happening, which I think is moving in the right direction in terms of with the rise of AI and the access to kind of the tools that allow you to do some of the more routine, mundane activities. It could do that for you. And so then what do you do with that capacity? How do you then retool individuals or upskill members, junior members, as well as more senior members in ways to be able to handle more work or get engaged in the complex, the more high risk, complex matters and work versus kind of the low risk, low complexity matters that AI can now do in many instances. And so we are seeing this trend of upskilling individuals across law departments and law firms and leveraging resources differently and thinking, what are the new skills that will help practitioners be more effective, particularly in engagement with clients. A lot of what we see is, particularly in the in-house law departments, the goal is to have your lawyers be strategic business partners, and be able to spend more time with your clients on those strategic issues, having more time to be more proactive, um, being more available to kind of be that business partner, I think is going to be really that trend. And building skills to help junior lawyers be more effective in those types of roles, versus kind of, again, some of the routine work that now AI can step in to do.
I think, Lauren, just on that, it's going to counterintuitively make the profession even more human. I think it's going to be the more interesting profession in 5 or 10 years, right? When as you said, the more routine things taken off, and we have to figure this all out still. But I'm excited because, like, exactly the way you describe it, like, what an interesting profession 5 years from now, right?
A more human profession. That is definitely something we need to evangelize that a lot more. So hopefully a ton of people listen to this. And it probably should have started with this topic, but just something obviously near and dear to all of our hearts. How are you handling client conversations? When it comes to AI.
I learn on all of these conversations with clients about, like, what are their challenges, and what have they seen and heard in the market. And I think there's some really interesting sort of themes coming out of those conversations. Like, in addition to sort of the fact that nobody has this all absolutely figured out over the past certainly the past 6 months, but even longer, with the number of GCs as we're talking about this and thinking through it, they're more and more pushing for sort of having AI in the loop, right? And I think that that's a really neat part of the conversation as well, where they're being very thoughtful about the fact that I'm expecting my external counsel to sort of now be incorporating and leveraging some of these tools.
And Lauren, I mean, you're hearing in surveys, you're hearing in sounding boards, you're hearing in client engagements, working with law firms, what they're hearing from their corporate clients. I mean, this topic of what value means to clients and how AI can deliver work faster and cheaper. What do you how are you seeing law firms approaching law departments? What are law departments expecting?
I think this age of AI is really, especially in this early stage where everybody's trying to figure it out still, it could be a true differentiator for law firms. We see clients who are desperate to find new ways of delivering cost effective legal services. I mean, as all the surveys indicate, demand is increasing. But legal budgets from the in house perspective, are not increasing at that level of increased demand. And so there is this constant pressure. What do we do? How do we try to deliver more effective legal services? And so law firms were able to come to the table proactively with innovative ideas on the leverage and the use of AI and how it ultimately then translates to better service delivery and outcomes for their clients in a way that, again, considers cost as well as outcome. I think is just what law departments are really wanting to see. Our clients are on the law department side saying, we're not seeing enough of that with law firms. They're not coming forward. When we ask, they will provide some perspective, but they are not proactively coming forward with those opportunities. And so I really do think, from what we're hearing from the corporate side, clients really want that. It's a differentiator. And we know that a lot of law firms are working through this. So again, on the law firm side, we've got uh, leaders dedicated and you've got teams dedicated to working through these things, but it's not becoming readily available or really visible to the clients. And so hopefully we're able to bridge that gap as we continue to evolve because I think it could be a wonderful way to partner law firms and law departments to advance the industry.
Every conversation that we have with firms, just considering the investments, considering some of the programs that you're talking about, the time and the money put in, it goes to ROI. How are firms demonstrating ROI? How are they thinking about it? Does ROI matter? I mean, how are you having those conversations at McCarthy's?
To be really blunt, I actually, like, this is just my own view, our view, quite frankly, I think it's the wrong conversation. Because it's a very kind of short term, like, okay, so what's the business case in the short term on sort of this investment in this tool or whatever it is? And I just think, a bit to your point, Lauren, like the way that things are evolving, it's going to be incredibly difficult, borderline impossible to sort of have a tightly described and proven sort of ROI for some of the tools. Having an exercise in the firms, like now speaking on the firm side of, well, we're going to try some things. We're going to see what how much, is this more efficient? Is it more effective? Of course, you're looking at sort of some of those things, but actually measuring that and sort of saying, is that the return on investment I'm getting? Again, I think is the wrong measure. We're in this sort of mode of sort of saying we're going to continually be trying things to drive more value for clients. Like, so I think, from my perspective, firms are asking the ROI questions should instead be asking, is this driving more value? Shorten up the deal terms so that you can actually then sort of say, okay, we're going to try this. Here's how efficient this is. And then in a year from now, we're going to actually look at sort of what's the tool sets looking like, and can I drive more value for the clients, right? And I think this notion of driving value and can I increase the value proposition for clients is a better conversation than sort of return on investment. Because I'm gonna be honest, like being able to sort of drive more value, growing your market share, growing your client base, how you measure all those things in a very quantitative way, I don't know. But I think that being able to kind of sit down with clients to say, like, we can actually now draft faster, research faster, do these things, more insights as well. Like, how do you measure insights that you're giving to clients in a quantitative way? So I could rant about this maybe for a while, but so I have a bit of a view, as you could probably tell, about the ROI question. So
I did really do agree, Matt, with the whole concept of value. Um, we do need to shift the conversation more in that direction. Again, working with law departments and law firms and appreciating the challenges that both sides of the ecosystem are facing. So much of it is been about cost of delivery of services, and there is something to be said that because the reality is there are cost pressures, but to try to pivot the conversation to say what is the value in the relationship that achieved when both sides come together to tackle challenges, to work together, the insights, the whole AI, how do we leverage AI to serve your matters more effectively? Those should be real conversations where you're trying to bring value to your clients as a firm, but also law departments appreciating the value that the firm could bring in those dimensions. So I really do love that because I do think that kind of conversation is what we need more in this industry overall. Yeah.
but I think a lot of the folks driving this in the firms are in a position where they're really managing up, right? And so, having more of a conversation in the industry as a whole around sort of how do we actually sort of focus on change management inside the firms, and and this is where again, to your point, Lauren, I think there can be a real neat collaboration between sort of the law firms and the clients, where like I've seen this now a number of times where the clients come alongside, like the innovation leader, whatever, wherever they're positioned in the organization, and then they collectively manage up inside the law firm, whereas the client's asking for it. So again, it's just positioning it not as the innovation sort of leader has to, demonstrate the ROI and sort of do all these internal things, but they're actually bringing the client along, where the clients are saying, look, we just actually here, we want you to invest in this tool, and this is important for us, and we actually believe as a partner of yours that, like it's a different kind of conversation when the clients are asking for it. So just helping, quite frankly, working together to help the innovation leaders in the law firms pivot from what's your ROI to, that's exactly as you said, Lauren, what's the value proposition, and bringing some stakeholders that can help with that conversation.
I think one of the last topics here, something that we all love, policies. So how are you how are you thinking about your leadership team, at McCarthy's, and Lauren, would love to hear some of what you're hearing and advising clients on, but considering the use of AI, just the ethical use and policies around retention and discoverability, and what's that looking like, and any advice do you have for peers?
Like, this is a weirdly fun topic, and oh, no, it really is. I mean, the way that we've approached this is, and this goes back a number of years, we actually broke this down into sort of, three buckets when we were approaching and thinking about AI. Now, I don't know if this is the right or wrong way, but it certainly has worked for us. Like, the first bucket was policy. The second bucket was really essentially what I'll call sort of mapping our business needs to serve some of the tools out there. And then the third bucket is sort of impact on the profession, impact on our business as we go forward. But it was that first bucket on policy that actually laid the groundwork, and it was the first one that we focused on. So being able to just establish essentially like what I would call sort of like the foundation in the organization, what it gives people the freedom to sort of experiment, gives people sort of the, like it takes, like what is, it can be like change is scary, I think, for anybody, but in the legal profession is particularly scary, but taking a little bit of the fear of, am I allowed to do this? Am I going to wreck something, or am I going to, do the wrong thing? And the policy framework is the framework that allows you, because it underpins how you're training. It underpins what tools are safe. Like it underpins all of those pieces. How should I do this? Right? Like, humans in the loop and everything else. The policy piece was the first piece that we really put some effort into, going back a number of years. And very thankful that we invested first in that, and that has made, none of this is easy, but it's made the rest easier for people, and has made it sort of more it's democratized sort of AI, because it's no longer sort of the little, the priesthood of a few that sort of know how this works, and they're only ones that sort of really know what to do with this. To that your policy actually very publicly sort of says this is for everybody, and we want everybody to be trying this, right?
I think on the corporate law department side, it definitely has been interesting to see AI usage obviously growing and then moving from more of an ad hoc perspective to more formalized policy. So again, we're seeing this trend to say, okay, now that organizations have become more comfortable, have more use cases, they're able to kind of tighten the perspective on use of AI. And so we are definitely seeing and advising firms to ensure that, and law departments really, to ensure that they have well-defined policies on AI use, because they now have some experience and appreciation for the challenges and the benefits that they need to appreciate as they think about broadening the deployment of AI use across the legal department. So more formalization of policies is what we recommend, and obviously we're seeing a greater trend in that direction as well.
It's been interesting learning that. You've seen that like there's this health, for lack of a better term, tension, I think, with a lot of clients, because you have like, the C-suite collectively are like, we need AI everywhere, and rightly so. Like the legal team, their job is to sort of evaluate risk and sort of think about it, and so it's been, I think, some really good, healthy conversations inside, because policy allows, I think, it surfaces the conversation where you can't just turn AI on, do everything, and dump everything in. But at the same time, it pushes, I think, sort of the boundaries that the lawyers are comfortable with. Where it's kind of like the answer can't be no either, right? And so it's actually been driving, I think, some good conversations.
We've talked about talent. We talked about how you're approaching this with clients. We've talked about, policies. So we're going to kind of wrap this up, and Matt, I'm going to ask you to talk to your high school self. And any any parting thoughts or wisdom to high school Matt,
Yeah.
that you'd like to share on this moment?
Well, yeah. Don't be such a twit here, poor Mister Perry. But no. I think, talking to sort of the next generation around this, like thinking about well, call the resilience of the profession that you're going into. So whatever that is, but if you're going into, for example, like as you're evaluating different options, and you're looking at kind of, where you'd like to kind of grow in your career, I think it really is, like the linear nature of sort of what it looked like in the past is obviously no longer going to be there. So this idea of sort of going into professions that are resilient, going and quite frankly, developing the skills that give you a personal level, sort of a level of adaptability and resilience, is like the skill set looks very different now. Like the EQ is more important than the IQ. The ability to sort of be, like, quite frankly, adapt and practice your ability to sort of adapt. Is some of those skills that are going to be the most, successful. And then I'm obviously a big fan of the legal profession, slightly biased, but this problem solving capability. I mean, like, you learn 4 kids, and we've sort of talked about all the areas that they're interested in, and this, thankfully, at least have one kid going into law school, and but we, and this focus on sort of, you are going to develop these great problem solving skills, and I think it's going to be one of the, it's going to be the lawyers professional athletes and the policymakers in government are probably the last profession standing, is what I sort of imagine. And then so it's but being very intentional about sort of what those things are that will survive, as you described earlier, Lauren. This, like a lot of the commoditized stuff going away, and when you peel all that back, what's left, and making sure that that the folks heading into their different professions actually know what the survivable skills are, and that they're focused on those.
Yeah. I would add to that to say, really embrace AI for what it's
Hmm.
designed to be, for what it's great at, right? But there are things that AI cannot do. And again, adding to what Matt was saying about obviously the EQ, the relationships, the strategic perspective, the problem solving. Those are things that that AI is not really created to be doing, and that human element, honing in on kind of again embrace AI for what it is, and then develop and grow and expand those skills that will help you differentiate yourself in the age of AI. Excited really for what's ahead because I think it's just a new norm, and we'll see innovation again as the fabric of how we all will always be thinking differently, looking for new ways, leveraging the tools that we have, but also thinking about how do we bring new value to everything we do. So really appreciate that we're in living in exciting times.
Thanks for listening to Legal Soundings. Subscribe for future episodes. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Harbor's work across law firms and corporate legal departments, visit harborglobal.com.